Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for taking some of your valuable time to join me today as I do one of the more important stories that I've ever come across. As people know, I've done contact modalities. I wrote a book, it's not yet out, but I've done two sort of previous similar books on contact modalities where the idea is that there are people in this world who can sort of leave this sort of physical plane and tap into another field, tap into God, tap into whatever. And so I wrote this book, and one of the things that I really got taken with was this idea of physical mediumship. And you will see in the UFO field, if you're familiar with Whitley Strieber, that Whitley Strieber wrote a book called Communion, and he got 200,000 letters from this book back in the 1980s. And his wife, Anne, was editing these letters, and she came out after a long period of time reading these letters, and she said, Whitley, whatever this is, this UFO thing is, it has something to do with death. And I know there's some people in the Aviary who have described the fact that if you can explain what's happening at the moment of death, you will explain all the mysteries. So what we're going to talk today about is about physical mediumship and about mediumship. And I have two guests with me, Reverend Kevin Lee and Walter Rucker. Now, they sort of came to me because basically, and we won't get into this today, but I was doing a DNA experiment, which I think will basically flip the world on its head if it actually works the way I think it's going to work. And so Walter actually contacted me and offered to help with this experiment. And then I found out that they were linked into this physical mediumship, which I think is basically very, very important for people to know and to realize this stuff is going on, and it answers so many questions. So I want to welcome these two guests, and I also want to welcome Sinead Wellahan, who's has come on as an assistant of mine to help me do interviews. She has sort of a vision of doing this kind of stuff. This is something that I am not that interested in. I'm more a researcher. So we're teaming up, and she's joining me today, and she may have a question or two. But I want to welcome Walter and Kevin to this very important discussion. And maybe we can start with Walter, and maybe you can sort of introduce yourself a little bit and your background and how you got into this. And then Kevin can take over, and then we can get into the questions about mediumship, physical mediumship, and why this is so important.
Great.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for this, by the way, Grant. Sneed, good to see you, and Kevin.
Absolutely. Good to see you, Walter.
I'm 68 years of age. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, in the paper products and printing industry with my father, and have a couple of adult sons. Been married coming up on 50 years. Wow. The way I got from here, Memphis, Tennessee, to physical mediumship and to Kevin is raising family and not paying much attention to anything metaphysical or spiritual, and until I was able to spend some time with myself and try to figure out some of those very basic questions. Where do we come from? What are we supposed to be doing? I was raised Roman Catholic. That didn't work out for me. So I started looking around for other things that might explain some of the questions that I had about my own personal existence. And it wasn't long until I happened upon Harry Potter. And Harry Potter was running around shooting magic out of his wand, and I thought, well, that's pretty cool. How does magic work? And magic took me to alchemy, and as Google will take you to anywhere it wants, it took me to physical mediumship, and this was probably 10 years ago. I'd never heard of it. I hadn't really heard much about mediumship. I've had psychics that opened up little 2-bit stores up and down the street from where I live, but it was about the closest I came to anything that would be metaphysical in nature. And next thing I know, I'm moving from Atlanta, Georgia, down to Naples, Florida. I'm across the Florida Peninsula from Kevin Lee in the Metaphysical Chapel of South Florida, where he's done such a fabulous job of promoting all kinds of psychism, mental mediumship, physical mediumship. We became close friends. He invited me to, and I've attended dozens of seances there and elsewhere. And Kevin, it's your turn now.
Okay, that's a nice introduction. Thank you. So anyway, I just appreciate being given an opportunity to speak and to share my experiences because, you know, like Walter said, you know, this world of metaphysics, this world of what so-called physical mediumship and spirit communication, and even you know, I'll kind of drop it in there, even contact with consciousness that either has bodily form or a non-bodily form. It seems that's part of the world that you, Grant, are really tapping into as well. And all of these concepts were very foreign to me. Really the only understanding of, for lack of a better word, I'll use mystical experiences. And that was because I grew up in Texas, Central Texas, where we were, our family and our community was very white, very Baptist, Southern Baptist, very traditional, very conservative. And so the only references to anything of anything we might be talking about was in the mystical experiences of the Bible, in the stories. And there was always something that made sense to me as a child, even as a little child. And I knew that there was two levels to all of these biblical scriptures. I knew that there was a level that was superficial, and it was exactly as it said. And then there was a deeper level that was meant for something else, but I didn't understand that was metaphysics or even, say, mystery school teachings, where you have masters teaching the disciples and things like that. And I also knew that the prophet Jesus, was teaching his disciples this hidden knowledge or this hidden understanding of scriptures, and was giving them the potentials, the powers, the understanding of how to access whatever this was. And it was very hard for me to grasp. And then probably about 14 years ago, I had just finished a background, well, really my graduate degree in nursing anesthesia. It's what I'd always wanted to do. So my background academically is in science and is in nursing. I received my master's of science in nursing, focused on anesthesia. That was 2007, really 2006, the end of the year. 2007, started practicing locally. And so definitely very much science-based, but I had this draw, this really, I know now, a pull in my spirit, something that's beyond myself, to really return to the principles, the teachings of whatever the heck this God thing was, whatever religion was, whatever that something beyond me that kept pulling me. I could feel it. I didn't want to acknowledge it was God. I was very much against the concept of God. I was very angry at the concept of God, and very much angry with the church for many, many years because of a lot of abuse and mistreatment of other people, of myself, of my family, public humiliation, and also, as we know, wars around the world because of a four-letter word called faith. And everybody believes that their access to this creative divine source is the right road, when what I've learned over the last 14 years, without jumping too far ahead, is that there are multiple ways to get to the top of the mountain. And there are easy ways, there are slow ways, there's fast ways, there's scientific ways, there's bizarre ways, there's angry ways to get to the top of the mountain. There's so many different ways, and those different ways are religions. And every religion has a purpose. And that's one of the things that with a lot of my spirit communication that has come through over and over again, is that every religion, every prophet had a purpose for existence, and we have to recognize that and honor it. So that's just kind of a little bit of a religious bend on the topic of today. But I will say that about 13 years ago, after I had finished my nurse anesthesia program, and received my nurse practitionership and my nurse anesthetist licensing. I was at home one day and I had a very strange experience, and the only terminology looking back that I had was this concept of the Holy Spirit coming around me. And I had never felt it, but I had seen it in certain churches we had attended, and in particular the charismatic Holy Roller churches, which we were a part of for a little while. And there was something that that community had that was so unique, because they were able to access some sort of a divine power that put them into another state. And I recognized as an older kid, maybe a teenager, I think it was, when I had attended that community, that they were onto something, and I still didn't have the word for it. And I didn't like how they were treating people, so I was still very cautious, but I recognized there was something there. So when I was at home here in Fort Lauderdale, this presence came into my home, and all I can say is it felt like a living electrical or energetic presence that wrapped around me. I could tell that there was a personality to it, but I couldn't put a gender to it. I knew I was safe, and if I followed it, it would lead me in a right direction. I don't know how I knew that. I'd never had the experience before, but I trusted that moment, and basically it got me out of my house, into my car, and I jokingly said when I shut the door, "Now what?" I said that out loud, and I could hear in my head, "Drive south." And I thought, did I just hear that, or did I just make that up? And I thought, what the heck is south of Fort Lauderdale? The airport in a sleepy little town called Dania Beach, and a lot of tourists from Canada go there. And it's just kind of it's just a little sleepy tourism kind of town. Nothing's going on there. And I thought, well, I don't have anything else to do. Let me go down there and check it out. So I drove south, went into this little town, started looking at the businesses, and all of a sudden, I can already feel the energy change in my room as I tell this story. But I could feel, I saw this sign actually first, and it said Metaphysical Chapel. And where I came from, that was like angels dating demons. Those two words never went together. You never mention those words together in church. And I thought, what the hell? How is it possible that those two words are even together? And I thought, well, that's weird. I'm not having anything of that. And I kept driving. Well, I didn't get very far, barely maybe 30 yards. And that presence came back and filled my car. And I thought, what the hell is going on? Why? What is this? And I could feel, turn around, turn around, turn around. So I thought, okay, I'll turn around. So I pulled into the little parking lot, and basically, to make that long story short, I ended up going back to the church because the sign said it was closed that week. They'd be open for Sunday services. And when I went back, I found this little community with a female pastor, which I had never seen before. And she began to interpret Bible scripture metaphysically. And as she did it, this energy, for lack of a better word, began to rise, and I felt like I was beaming. I wasn't happy, but I could feel something coming alive inside me, and I realized whatever that woman is talking about is exactly what I've been seeking since I was a child. And she is able to interpret the scripture that I knew very well because we had to memorize it. And I thought, where did she get this understanding of the scripture? And how is she able to interpret it in this deeper way that I was seeking? So that pretty much floored me. I witnessed spiritual healing, which I'd never seen done in a church. I'd heard about it. That amazed me because it went right back to biblical mysticism. And then at the very end of the service, she said, all right, we're going to bring messages to some of you from Spirit. And I thought, what did you just say? And she began to give messages. And I wish I could remember my message, but all I remember of the experience was that some people cried in recognition to the messages from loved ones that came through. Some people were just, their mouths were open because the evidence was so strong. And I thought, what the heck is going on with this place? What is this place? And what are they tapping into that I don't understand what's going on? And I realized that evening, that day, that I had found my home. And I realized that this church was the next step in my life. And just a few months later, and I'll preface this by saying, I was so programmed in my old Christian beliefs that being a part of this community was going to tarnish my soul, or somehow keep me separate from whatever this God force is that I could feel my soul wanting to get pulled back into. But I was scared because I thought, evil influences might be lying to me, and these people may be lying to me, and I don't know what's going on. They're not doing a good job teaching me whatever they're trying to teach me. And the minister said, I want you to go to your first seance. And I thought, okay, well, I've heard of them, but I don't know what this is all about. And then she pulls out these little cards, a stack of probably 20 or 30 of them. And these cards have writings on them, pictures on them, signatures on them, which was very interesting. And she said, now, and she started to explain the evidence behind this. And I thought, this old man, whoever did this for her, has lied to her and taken this poor woman's money. And this can't be real. This is fake. It's trickery. It's a magic show. And it really pissed me off, to be honest, because I had liked this woman, my minister. And I thought, somebody has scammed this old woman. And how dare they do this? And you know what? I'm going to prove this guy's a fraud. And I know it's going to hurt her, but I'm going to stop him from hurting other people. And I went to the seance with the premise I was going to out him, because it didn't make any sense to me. Not only was I upset at what he had supposedly done with this woman with these cards, and now I know it's called precipitation, but I also was so tormented in my spirit that I hadn't told anyone. I was probably a week or two from leaving that church. Right around Christmas time, I had planned on stepping away and never going back, because I just, in my spirit, I had created this self-created turmoil, for lack of a better word. And mentally and spiritually, I was very upset with myself for being pulled into this kind of an organization. I didn't know if it was real. My spirit told me it was exactly where I needed to be, but my head told me run, because you're being lied to, and I couldn't justify both of them. So I went to this experience. The old man singled me out, and he gave me information that was highly evidential to my grandmother at the time, who was in spirit. It described her to a T, that she had a man's name, and how she lived and how she contributed to her community, and that she lived next to railroad tracks, but it was really in the country, strange stuff like that. And he said she loved the church that I was a part of. And I thought that was very interesting, because when she was alive, she never would have said that. And I thought, that's interesting. She didn't call me a sinner. She didn't tell me that I was wrong for being a part of this community, but she uplifted me, and she celebrated what I had stepped into. And then he said, it's Christmas time, and I'm not being funny with you, young man, but I'm going to tell you, you have two saintly figures standing here, and they're telling me that they are working on a very important project with you right now that is the beginning of many to come. And what no one knew was that the night before I had just finished this sermon, my very first sermon, which I didn't want to do, but the minister talked me into it, on the birth of Jesus at Christmas from the metaphysical perspective. I had zero understanding, but she gave me these really dusty old books that smelled moldy, and I had to pour through these old books. And I learned more in that 2 weeks writing that sermon about metaphysics than I had ever learned in my life. And that was I was roughly 35, 37 years old, something like that, maybe a little older. And I guess around 37. So anyway, no one knew that. And he said, they're telling me that you have the right, or you have free will. You have free will to leave this church, which was interesting that he would say that, and they would say that. And he said, but they're telling me, if you stay, you'll change the lives of tens of thousands of people in your life. You don't realize the potential you hold in what you're meant to do and why you've been guided here. They guided you to the church, and they love that church. And I thought, how in the hell does this guy know this? And how crazy is it, these two saints that I never prayed to, why would they even come to me? I knew the story. I loved their story, what they stood for, but I never idolized them. I never prayed to them. I never talked to them. But that message literally hit me really hard, because I realized in the moment they weren't calling me a sinner from a theological perspective. They weren't telling me to run like hell from this church, because it was against all of the teachings of the book. And I realized in that moment that whatever this old man is doing or producing in the phenomena of precipitation, which came just after that message, I realized there was something in there that was for me and that needed to be a part of my ministry going forward. So very shortly after that, he said, basically, they have a gift for you, their likeness on a card. And I definitely have that card available. It's not on this computer to share with you, but I will make it available to you. And this, basically, it was a painting, a Renaissance style painting of Mother Mary and Father Joseph. And when I went home that evening, I pretty much burst into tears and realized I had been fully reborn in my spirit, for lack of a better word. I no longer had pain. I didn't feel separate from this God force. I didn't feel separate from the world of spirit all around me, even though I didn't understand it. Whatever that was, I knew a little bit about it. And I realized I was not being judged. I was not being spoken to harshly, but I was being supported and elevated in very loving and kind ways by this intelligence, by this consciousness that didn't have a body, but yet was somehow coming through this medium. And it totally changed me. And I realized this is what I'm meant to do. And that literally began, that very strange experience began my rapid research into what is mediumship. How is it even possible that someone who's died can continue to bring through highly specific evidence to the recipients here in the third dimension from a higher dimension, fourth or fifth, even beyond, I guess. And how is that possible, and can I do that? So that began my journey to where in the world can I go to study all this stuff, which led me to Arthur Findlay College outside of London. I went there several times to train and to study. And it also led me to start asking everybody I knew, how can I find these people with these same potentials, healers, mystics, seers, people who can bring through messages from loved ones or angels or beings that aren't even human, or what is this transmediumship? What is psychic surgery that I kept hearing about? And what is this physical mediumship, this form of physical mediumship called precipitation? And what I found very quickly was these precipitated images and writings that this minister, Reverend Hoyt Robinette, had produced for me, that one card and those cards for that lady, the minister. What I realized was that it was a dying art, and that very few mediums alive today even have the potential to demonstrate it. And I probably know the 5 or 6 that are still living with that potential, and I know a few students who have developed it to some degree. And so now that precipitation mediumship, which is a type of physical mediumship, meaning the spirit world is able to physically manifest their thoughts, their message, their intentions in a very organized, intelligent, even humorous and scientific ways. It's really incredible when you look at the phenomena. It just goes to show the power of the mind continues. This essence of my ego, of Kevin, will continue into higher realms. And I can bring that aspect back from this life in the next life to someone who wishes to communicate with me. I can share the representation of myself back with those on Earth, and potentially, theoretically, on other planets, if I have some sort of a representation there. That part of me that has experienced all this can go back, can be returned back. And it's almost like Spirit said it, the best way they could describe this is, especially if we believe in the concept of reincarnation, it's as though they pull an aspect of light from our soul, like the facet of a diamond, and they literally refract it and send it back to Earth, to the recipients who knew me, that specific facet or signature of the diamond, where you will know that's me and my life experiences with you, the evidence of life memories, nicknames, shared experiences, potentials. And but yet another person or another being in another, say, a planet or another dimension, who needs to experience another facet of me, that diamond will be turned, and then a new facet will be refracted or reflected, I guess, out into the proper dimension to be received by the person, or the person, the being, that knows me in that way. And so it just blows my mind, because in my lectures on precipitation mediumship and physical mediumship, I talk about this concept of there is a science to the phenomena. There's a philosophy to the phenomena. There's definitely a religious aspect or higher spiritual aspect to it. And I say religious, it's almost a universal religion, because it is not necessarily Catholic or Hindu or metaphysical or even cosmic, non-earth based religion. It's a blend of everything. And it really blows my mind, because I've seen different aspects of religion from primitive cultures, and they have access to a spirit world and a dynamic that I do not have access to. And they have told me, the elders or the shamans or the medicine men have told me, you will never have that potential because you weren't born a part of our people. You can touch into that world, but you'll never have full control of it like we do. And every culture, every primitive people like the Aboriginals or the Lakota Indians or the Apaches or the Navajo, whichever people it is, Eskimos, and well, not necessarily Eskimos, but the people of the northern nations that are very Arctic, or the Siberian cultures, they have an access or a reach into, a key into the spirit world, into the higher dimensions that the rest of us don't really have access to in a strong way. And that pretty much, that solidified my experience in as to why I even do what I do. Why is Walter in my world? Because Walter was also accessing something about this higher consciousness, and it led him to me. Because one of the things I didn't have when I opened up to all this, there was no one around me of any high caliber teaching what I was desperately seeking. I literally had to travel to other countries, to other states, and to remote areas to find these bizarre things, because I wanted to bring those people to my community. I wanted to be a center of light that didn't exist. I wanted to provide for my people what was never provided for me. So I was determined that was going to be my goal, to build as many opportunities to share these crazy experiences by people who walk their talk. I can talk about it. I've studied it. I know Spirit has guided me to these books and these experiences for a reason. I may not be able to demonstrate it, but I can certainly talk about it and get those people to come and be a part of my community, to share. And that's what I've done. And that's why Walter's been a part of my community, because he's really been very helpful over the years in helping me contact certain individuals or locate them or research them. And we figure out what would be for the highest and best of the people, what could they tolerate and understand, and also what would they be interested in participating in. So, we've kind of bounced balls back and forth to try and figure out what would really work in South Florida and what can we do with this in a bigger scale. So we've really begun to take it a little more to YouTube, what is it called, Facebook Live, and programs like this. It's really a new level for us. And it's very interesting, this whole world of physical mediumship, because many people don't know, you guys probably do know, that concept of ectoplasm and ghost and the spirit world was made very known in the movie Ghostbusters, because Dan Aykroyd has a history with his family and his older relatives within the world of spiritualism. And that came to light, I believe, after the grandfather, if I'm not mistaken, the grandfather passed and left all these journals about his experiences with spirit. And all of these crazy experiences really, it's what I live. People, I literally say, and I joke about it, I feel like I live in a Hollywood movie, because I have witnessed things that only exist in movies for most people. I've witnessed objects in red light, in candlelight, literally appear in front of my eyes on command by a voice that doesn't even come through a medium, but just comes out of the ethers. Bizarre stuff. I've witnessed large objects manifest out of the mouth, the nose, the eyes. I've seen small objects fall out of the ears. I've witnessed objects shoot out of the hand. Curiously enough, this is a chakra, isn't it? We talk about chakras a lot in metaphysics and spirituality, and even in yoga, which I study a lot of. And where do these objects come from? This is a point of manifestation. It's almost like a portal, right? And so we have these swamis and the yogis and the mystics, the sadhus and all of that, that were able to produce objects from their hands, and literally they would shoot out. I've seen that. I don't recall, Walter, if you've been in the seances with some of the physical mediums where those objects have shot out in front of the room, but I have witnessed objects coming out of the hands. I'm telling you, this stuff is of movies, and the stuff is even highly evidential. The objects that came out, the individual that received this one in particular, I'll tell you a very quick instance. The medium Kai Muegge from Germany, a very dear friend, and in my opinion, if not the #1 physical medium in the world, demonstrating today at his level, definitely up there. But in my opinion, I do believe he's the most incredible physical medium because of the quantity and the quality of the phenomena that I have literally witnessed with my eyes. And the synchronicity and the evidence that comes through with the phenomena. When I first met him, I took him to dinner on our local beach, and I said, you know, I want to take you to the ocean and let you put your feet in the ocean and acclimate you to our energy. Let's bless you with our waters. So we went down to the beach late at night, probably around 9 in the evening. And as he walked out of the water and we were walking on the sand, I remember him starting to look around, and he got real fidgety and he was jumping around, and he was saying, there's something here, there's something here. And I thought, what the heck is wrong with him? There's seashells, pick them up if that's what you want. What are you talking about? And what he said was, no, it's not the seashells, there's something here. And as he jumped back and he stepped away from his footprint, and he said, Kevin, there's something right there for you. Dig down in the sand. And as I dug down, my hand hit something, which I thought was a seashell, but it turned out to be quite a large resin, like a plastic cross that was very filigreed and beautiful, very detailed. And he started to tell me the story of how many years ago, when he started studying Sai Baba, he read some accounts of Sai Baba, literally where he would walk or where he'd sit or where he would stand, items would begin to appear out of the ground, out of the flowers, or things would fall beside him from out of things. And so he took on that ability. The very next day in this seance, when we hosted it, I'm going to make this as a segue. Jacques Brocas, the head of the International Society for the Standards of Mediumship and Psychical Investigation, ISIMPI, Jacques Brocas, who's the president, had traveled to this experience to basically see what the heck is really going on with this medium. Is he legit? Could we potentially do some certification work to test him, the medium? And interestingly, he had told his main spirit guide, Jacques had, if this guy's legit, I want an apport, and I want a cross. That is going to be my evidence. That's how I'll know you're with me. And what came out of the hand that evening from Kai, from the spirit control of Kai Hans Bender, shot out of the hand, and I witnessed it, a white resin cross that was literally the inside piece of my cross that I had received the night before. And it was basically the Jesus version on the cross without all the filigree and all the extra detail. It was the middle of my cross. And it even had a little hole as though it was a pendant, just like mine had the same thing, made of the same material. That is highly evidential. And it was evidential because the individual asked for it and the individual received it, and the medium had no clue it had been asked for. Profound stuff like that. And so that organization, Jacques Brocas and ISIMPI, which is an international organization, really trying to bring back, unfortunately that we even have to do it, but to bring back professionalism and standards of ethics in the business of spirit. And I don't say business of spirit to be disrespectful. I mean it in a broader sense of a network of people trying to be professional. We know that there are fraudulent mediums and psychics and healers out there, people with ego and agendas, but we also know that there are legitimate ones. And that's what Jacques and his board of trustees and directors around the planet have been trying to work on, is setting up these standards. And so Jacques and the international board came and certified my center as a gold standard certified center for that international organization, because we could bring mediums into a setting that can be locked and testing can be done on the mediums. So we receive that certification status, the highest level, because of the quality of the space and the quality of the mediums, just the whole experience. And when we began working, when my church and my board began working with this organization, they had disclaimers and formats that we needed to follow. We had processes that had to go into place to make sure that the mediums are constantly in a state of legitimacy and professional behavior. That we as I guess that I as the host, or I as the individual representing publicly the medium locally, and even the guests who attend, we all of us have the right to investigate, to question, to search, and to make sure that there is no fraudulent behavior taking place, no questionable things being added to the room last minute, nobody walking in with objects or items in their body, on their body, things like that. So we have a very rigid and very aggressive, I'm going to say aggressive, which I actually like, because it puts people on notice that we are taking this seriously. And so what we do is when people purchase to go to these events that are being tested, or even just non-tested events held at my church, I personally interview every single ticket buyer. I want to know who you are, where you live. I want to know what is your interest in even attending this event. What are your experiences in the world of mediumship, physical mediumship, or metaphysics? What are you going to do with this knowledge? Why is it so important to you? Because I have come across some journalists who wanted to write. They were not invited. I didn't allow them. Unfortunately, because journalists tend to create and write things that don't actually happen, or they have their own agendas. I've been burned in my own very small New York Times article piece many years ago. Mistruth was what I said was not what was written. And talk about a dagger in my heart, straight in my heart. I realized why a lot of politicians don't like journalists, because they love to manipulate things. That's a whole nother discussion. But anyway, so we want to make sure that these individuals are coming for the right reason, and that they can even handle the level of mediumship or higher truth, or even the level of reality they're about to be thrown into the deep end with. Because in the very beginning, when I would allow people to come to these, we had a few people that would freak out, and they would demand to be let out. It would destroy the experience, because it basically poisoned the spiritual energy that was built up, and it brought the medium out into an awakened state, and they couldn't get back in. So unfortunately, there were a lot of refunds many years ago in the beginning. From those experiences. So we learned from that. So I questioned them, are you claustrophobic? Are you afraid of the dark, actually? Do you have neurological conditions or disease states where you lose touch with reality? Do you have schizophrenia that you've been diagnosed with? Do you have a split personality type disorder that you've been diagnosed with? I don't have a problem asking those questions, because I'm protecting my reputation. I'm protecting my church from litigation. I'm protecting the medium from harm. I'm protecting all the people who've invested to travel, to buy tickets, to get hotels, to get rental cars, and spend their time and money to come to something that may change their life. I'm doing a lot of protecting in those initial interview questions. And a few times people have taken offense to the questions, but I'm not too worried about it, because in the end, I make the decision. You're going to come. I'm the gatekeeper. If you don't answer my questions, you're not going to get to experience it, because it tells me right away, if you don't like these questions and you're going to challenge me, you already are a red flag. What kind of damage can you do when you show up or when you leave based on your own agendas and ego? So you're better off in these situations when people challenge you in the very beginning. That door needs to be shut. They should have no opportunity to attend until they've proven themselves different in the future. And so once we've done that, we also have them we prepare them with a lot of instructions for these experiences. We make sure they understand the very basics, at least, of when you're in the experience, how you must be in control of your emotional state. You can't be screaming and laughing out loud in raucous ways and in ways that could send ripples of vibration out into the room that could bring the medium to a state of more conscious level, or that could somehow affect and limit the phenomena that could be brought forward by spirit. So we teach people not to touch things unless they're given permission to. They're not allowed to do anything unless spirit or the myself, the host, or even the, say for instance, a medium's wife or significant other gives permission for you as a guest to do something interactively. And we teach them why we use music. Why is music important in the process? Why? Music is a vibration. It raises the vibration. That's why we sing these funny old camp songs, or we sing pop radio songs, and people laugh at that. But what has every Aboriginal or First Nation people done in their culture to access spirit? They have drummed, played rattles, they've played flutes, they've sung these songs almost in a mantra kind of way. What are mantras? Speaking of mantras, it's a frequency and a vibration of raising oneself and filling the space so that that's higher spiritual truth and contact can be made. That's what mantra is, raising one's vibration. So it's really interesting, the correlation with music and seances. And I will also say that preparing these guests with all of the instructions, we also make sure that they show up prepared with all the instructions. You know, they need to follow a specific diet where they're avoiding certain things that could be disruptive to their body. It could be, it could make them belch. It could make their metabolism a little too high and cause the bowels to move, things like that. It could, you know, you need to be consuming things that are not spicy and of that nature. It just needs to be mild food. Because again, if your body is focused on digestion, or you're trying to control an out of control body, to keep it professional, you're going to be focused on yourself. Your body's energies are going to be focused on maintaining a state of normalcy. You're not contributing to the experience. You're taking away from that experience spiritually. So those are very important. And we remind people that we will be searching you. We will be frisking everybody. We'll have gender-specific frisking stations, if you will. We will have metal detectors. We have video camera detecting systems. We also have radio frequency detecting systems, because nowadays you can go on eBay and you can buy eyeglasses that hold full color, high definition video cameras. They have video cameras with and without sound. There are devices the size of lipstick containers that can actually see in the dark. So they are a type of night vision technology. They don't have sound capability to record it, but they can definitely see what's going on in the dark. And they don't need a red light source, which is interesting. Things like this, they're very expensive, but it's possible. So we have to make sure that these items are not brought into the experience. And so when they come to the doors, we'll begin the process of talking to them about what they're about to get themselves into. Does anybody have any last-minute considerations? Are you concerned about anything? Do you have any last-minute questions? And we try to get all the questions out of the way, get everyone prepared, off to a bathroom break, right? And then we bring them back into the room one by one. And we literally begin the process of frisking, metal detection, video equipment detection, radio frequency detection, and everything. Everyone must go through stations, turn in their disclaimers, and then they are seated by either the medium or the medium's representative, circle leader, or even myself. And then lastly, of course, the medium is always checked. The host, myself, is checked. The circle leader, maybe the spouse, is checked. We generally, the most important individuals, myself, the medium, the circle leaders, we allow the brand new people especially to come and search us, because we want to make sure that the newbies get opportunities to search the room, to search the people in positions of power in that experience, meaning the people in charge, right? So we have people turn things over, the medium's chairs turned over, any pillows in the room are checked, under desks, if there's any desks or tables in the room, those are checked. The medium's water bottle may be checked and tasted. The mediums, I've had mediums strip searched all the way down to their underwear and bra. We've had people frisking those sensitive areas, gender-specific searches, just so there's no inappropriateness. So we're very detailed in all of these scientific steps to make sure there's no fraud and no manipulation taking place. And we also make sure that the room is pitch black. I unfortunately have to go through a process of bringing in volunteers because we have about 7 huge windows in this room that we have as a certified room, and we black the windows out with cardboard and visqueen, or like trash bag material that's very thick. And also we use painter's tape to hold things in place, and duct tape, like a black duct tape, to really seal out any rays of light that may be coming through. So we have about 3 to 4 layers on every window and every door and around every air vent, and even in the ceiling, because we have a drop ceiling. So light will come in through a neighboring room that we don't have access to, so we even have to black all that out. So there's a lot of light testing that takes place, so it's pretty extensive. It's about a 4 to 5 hour process to prepare the room just for darkness. And so the room is sealed that night of the seance. Once everybody's been checked and seated, I seal the doors, and I make sure the doors are locked. No one can come in. If we need to, we'll place a volunteer outside the front door to make sure no one comes with a code to access our room, which is another layer of security. And then I go back to my chair, lights go off, and we begin. And what we do is, in those first 5 minutes, especially for a lot of the physical mediums, such as Muegge especially, his is very interesting. We do something with him that we do not do with a lot of other physical mediums, because he works in an old spiritist way, very common in Europe, which is human contact control, 6-pointed control. If I'm seated on his left side, my right hand is grabbing my right hand grabs his left wrist. My left hand will grab his, my left hand grabs his left knee, and my right foot will grab his left foot. So I have 3 parts of myself in contact with 3 parts of one side of Kai. And in addition, his wife has 6 points of control as well. 3 points of control as well, because she's doing the same thing on the other side. So we demonstrate how we have his feet, his knee, and his hands all under human control anytime there's phenomena happening in the room. Typically, especially in English or in American mediumship, physical mediumship, they tend to bind and gag and chain and police tie. I believe that's what they're calling it now. They use these big plastic ties that will cinch down the arms and legs, and sometimes even the neck of the medium to the chair, so that they are fully bound in that chair and they can't get out of it. But again, with Kai, we work differently. And what's fascinating with that, the way he works, is that when the trumpets begin to elevate, trumpets are these aluminum, probably 2 or 3 feet long devices. They can be made of plastic, they can be made of cardboard or even wood. And they're basically a hollow megaphone that spirit will attach ectoplasmic rods to and levitate them through the room. So they're under control by spirit. But when those are levitating, shooting side to side in the seance room, or front to back, and this is like a 25 by 30 foot room, it's quite large. When that's happening, the spirit control is always telling me and the wife, Julia, to begin to grab the medium on all 3 points on every side, on both sides of him. And when we do, the phenomena continues. Nothing's changed. So if the medium's not moving and he's under my control and Julia's control, what's causing it? And then to go one step further, the spirit control will tell me, Kevin, I want you to let go of the left side, but lean over his body, pass your hands across the solar plexus where ectoplasm is created predominantly. And I want you to feel the chest and the torso and the abdomen and see if you can feel anything, and then reach over and grab Julia's body and find her hands and find her knees, see where she's at. And as I'm reaching across, nothing is, I'm connecting with nothing in the solar plexus, nothing in the torso. And yet the phenomena is flying all over the room. And I make contact with the wife, Julia, and she is exactly where she is, where she's supposed to be. She's holding exactly the parts of the body she's supposed to be. How in the hell is this happening? And when I ask Spirit, how is it even possible? How are you levitating this trumpet, or even these what do you call them, tambourines, these objects that have luminous tabs? And they say, well, we know that you know that it comes from the solar plexus and the torso and the genital area. That's where we produce a lot of ectoplasm. So we dematerialize about 3 to 4 feet of that, where you're going to be moving into that area, and we allow it to become solid again beyond you. So it is solid in the room, holding those objects up. You all think they're flying through the air, but they're actually being held up by a physical substance, the ectoplasm. I mean, that is really amazing that they're able to manipulate the physical structure and allow matter to pass through antimatter, or I guess the other way around, antimatter to pass through matter, which we know from scientifically speaking, antimatter does pass through matter. And I've been with other mediums, such as Stewart Alexander in Cobber Hill a few years ago, where literally I was under control of the medium's arm that was bound to a chair, and there was a loud pop in the room, and suddenly the hand that I was pulling on came free, the physical hand. And when I felt the arm of the medium, there was the full restraint, the plastic restraint that had literally dematerialized and rematerialized outside of the armrest. That was a solid piece of wood with a little hole where the tie could go through. And they said, you want to see us put it back? I said, well, I won't see it, but I guess I'll hear it. And all of a sudden they said, drop the arm. And as I dropped it, there was a loud pop in the room. And they said, pull the arm up. And when I pulled the arm up, it was reattached to the chair's arm and perfectly in place. Incredible. Another time, they allowed the restraint of that medium, of Stewart Alexander, to go through his wrist, to remain on the chair, and there was no restraint anywhere on the arm. And when I felt it on the chair, it was in full, perfect, locked position. It was perfectly round and encased in itself. It was incredible. And then it went right back through his arm again. So another example of this matter through matter principle of the dematerialization of an object to pass through another object. And if they could hold it long enough, which is what they did with me with Kai, they were able to demonstrate and prove to me there was no chicanery taking place, because objects were still flying in the room and touching people, and yet I'm leaning across a medium, searching in the dark for rods, ectoplasmic rods and things like this. I couldn't touch them. They were there, but I couldn't touch them. So that was pretty amazing. And as the evening went on, especially with Kai Muegge, it went into other phases, which is a phase of very dim red light, and then even bright red light with candlelight. And we were able to witness literally extraction of a mass of, it looked like spidery ectoplasm, this web substance that the control of the medium pulled out of the mouth. And it sounded like he was under great distress, the way it is done, but they said it didn't hurt the medium. This massive ectoplasm, which looked like a ball of cloud, this breathing ball or this cloud on the floor, it was red light. It literally breathed on its own. It wasn't connected in any way to the medium. The floor was solid concrete. And it literally breathed as though it was a living life force. And it was the living life force of the medium in a physical form. Next, the medium, the control of the medium, Hans Bender, said, now watch, I'm going to manifest a part of myself in the ectoplasm. And so again, out of this mass of ectoplasm on the floor begins to form a stub into a hand. into an arm with this kind of a solid form of a hand. And next thing you know, the fingers separated. And he said, I'll do one better. And then on the gentleman's ring finger, the signet ring of the spirit control, Hans Bender, began to form, and it looked like a large square ring. It didn't take on gold appearance, but you could tell what it was because there was shadows and darkness in the ring, so you could tell it was a gentleman's ring. Amazing. And we greeted the hand, we waved at the hand, it waved at us, and it sank back into a solid concrete floor where the mass was breathing on the floor and disappeared. The lights went off. Then we counted to about 3 or 5. The lights went on, the little dim red lights, and the mass had already pulled up into the mouth and was disappearing. And literally, we saw the tail end of it go inside, and there was no swallowing. It just disappeared in the mouth. That was profound. And other times I've witnessed ectoplasm that was pulled out again by the medium's control. And this happened actually just in December with Kai. The medium's control said, you will witness 2 faces in the ectoplasm. One will be the person that is controlling the phenomena to produce faces in ectoplasm, which actually, if you've studied the old spiritualist books, there are these strange, it literally looks like printed material on some sort of a cloth, but it's actually ectoplasm. They do look fake in the books, but when you see it in real life through Kai, you see it literally is exactly as it is in the old books. And so he said, one face will be the control that is causing the phenomena to happen. The other one, someone here will recognize. And we came up in groups of 3 in the bright red light. We looked, none of us realized who it was. And the last group of 3 who came up was a dear friend of mine, a developing mental medium, and two guests. And he suddenly jumped back and gasped and got very emotional. And he said out loud, that is my mother's wedding picture. And he said, I haven't seen that picture in a long time. And that profoundly affected him for days after that. He was incredibly emotional, shocked that she came through. Every time I go to experiences and he's there, he always gets a message from various mediums from his mother, because he clearly was a mother's boy. He was her baby. And she is always bringing him messages. That is just so incredibly evidential to me and to him and to the room. That same phenomena happened a few years ago with one of my best teachers, one of my oldest mediumship teachers at my church, who recognized one of his relatives who had passed a spirit many, many years ago in the ectoplasm through Kai again. Just truly profound stuff. So these experiences have such profound phenomena that it honestly demands that there be a scientific process involved, because as we know, there are mentalists, there's magicians, there are tricksters out there who love to manipulate the public, and unfortunately I've caught a few of them, and it tested my belief. I almost left my belief system many years ago because of it, because it just killed me. I really was worried that what I had gotten myself into was a whole bunch of hocus pocus, until I started seeing the repetitive evidence being highly evidential and the phenomena being evidential. So then it brought back a ray of hope in my spirit that it actually, the potential was there for legitimate mediumship and spirit communication. And that's why I'm a part of, and I'm a director for the International Society for the Standards of Mediumship and Psychical Investigation. We've got to have professionalism. We've got to have scientific processes in place to begin to test and even certify mediums. And they need to be rigorous, not harshly rigorous, but there needs to be a legitimacy to the work, because otherwise anybody can say they're a physical medium or a psychic surgeon or a healer. I mean, let's put it to the test. And, there needs to be testing in place. And I am excited to see where this DNA testing that you, Grant, have begun to talk about, which I didn't really know much about it. I knew who Jay-Z Knight was, and I'm going to be doing a lot more research on her now and that whole experience. I think that you are onto something, because it is really fascinating to me that that the evidence showed in the scientific testing that the DNA changes took place when there was a change in consciousness. And earlier I had a conversation with Walter because a couple of years ago I came across a scientific article in a neurological journal where doctors are beginning to, they have discovered that in multiple personality cases, people who present with seizure disorders, diabetes, even things like, oddly enough, herpes, just disease conditions that you can test for. Even if they have seizures, you can see the seizure potential within the EEGs. If they have cardiovascular problems in the physical body, you can see the damaged electrical pathways based on the representations of the ECG, the electrocardiograms. When that heart patient comes through personality-wise through the individual, you can test them and see that that is the personality, that is the scientific indicators. But yet when they switch to the patient that may be a different gender, a different race, and having a different disease state that presents, say, I don't know, a skin condition, if you will, or a neurological condition, they will then no longer have cardiovascular problems. They will no longer have the blood work that identifies that condition. It's disappeared. So neurologists and especially are fascinated if they can find the switch, and they think there's a switch. Maybe there is, I don't know. Maybe it's a DNA thing. If they can find the switch that allows the multiple personality disordered people to turn on and off diseases, why can't we turn disease off in the normal human state? And then we literally would have a society that would never die or age. It's fascinating. That's a pretty grandiose idea, but it's still fascinating. And I think it has something that ties into, again, consciousness, because in the research with DNA and consciousness and that tie between them, something is taking place between the consciousness of what is presenting through the medium or the psychic or the healer, the individual, and also the same with the multiple personality disordered people. There's a consciousness that is presenting that identifies as male, black, gay, Chinese, Asian, Aboriginal, whatever, or even a being not of this planet, which could be fascinating. Or of this dimension. So all of this is fascinating to me, and there has to be, I think, and Walter agrees, there's got to be more scientific investigation into this, because I think the Strieblers were really beginning to touch on something with the consciousness principle, and death is all about consciousness. It's just a transfer of our consciousness out of the body into a different vibration of frequency. And in all cultures throughout all time have talked about that. The yogis, the aboriginals, even the Christian mystics and the prophets of different religions talk about consciousness. The essence of you travels on, in the Father's house are many mansions. Well, it's not talking about places to live. It's more the vibrations of the state of your consciousness. And so the vibration of my consciousness may need to go to a resonant frequency of dimension based on my belief systems, or based on the tragedies and blessings of my life, the karmic influences of my life. And it's really fascinating, all of this. And that's why I've begun to travel and lecture and to be on shows like this, because there is so much more to life than what we know. We don't die, we continue living, and that living part of us is our conscious state. And it's really fascinating, because even in the world of metaphysics, I am hearing through the grapevine, a lot of the metaphysical conferences are getting away from, because the audiences are no longer greatly interested in witnessing the gifts of spirit demonstrated. They want to know, how does this apply to me in my soul? How does it apply to me in the next life? How does it apply to me today in this life? How does all this mystical and metaphysical stuff and other dimensional things, how does it affect my life today? And where is it leading me tomorrow? That's really what we're starting to see. So you're seeing a shift in the circuit of publicly speaking about consciousness and mediumship, healing, mysticism, and we're starting to see it, and I'm starting to see it even on TV in the paranormal shows, which I think is interesting, because it goes into this it leads very naturally into this existence of other beings on other planets, other dimensions. We may not have the words fully for all of them. We may not understand where they exist or where they're coming from, but definitely there are bridges that need to be made between all of our communities in all of the different I'll say that communities, because it could be metaphysical communities, it could be mystical, religious communities, it could be scientific communities, it could be the extraterrestrial UFO phenomena communities, or even just paranormal phenomena communities. How is it all interrelated? Because I think that there are bridges beginning to be noticed, and they need to continue to be built. So it's really fascinating to me. I know I've spoken about a lot, and I hope that I haven't taken us on too far of a tangent, but that's really the beginning. That's the tip of my iceberg of why I do what I do, and why Walter and I have begun to really see, are there other ways we can share all of our experiences and our knowledge and our contacts? Because it's all about sharing. I realized many years ago, it wasn't about me hoarding all of my experiences and my knowledge and my contacts. My life, really interesting, I started practicing gratitude and abundance, and I started noticing, as quirky and meta woo-woo as it sounds, I started noticing my life got a hell of a lot better, and doors started opening a hell of a lot faster when I started being grateful for what I had, the people that have come into my lives, and I recognized that whatever that is, the great beyond was sending people like you guys into my life to give me the next stepping stone to move forward. When I started sharing, it literally started coming back to me. So, I love to say, I love to tell my students, all this meta woo-woo stuff we talk about, it's actually real. There's something to it. I may not have all the understanding, but I have a pretty good grasp of it, and I know how to access it and activate it. You just got to go on faith. You have nothing to lose.
Absolutely. You are the guy I've been waiting for. I mean, I've looked around for quite a while, and you talked about having gratitude and us coming into your life, but you came into our lives. Sinead and I had this conversation probably a couple times in the last couple of days, this thing about gratitude and how you get direction from spirit. So I'm just fascinated.
And there's your confirmation. There's your confirmation
that
you're exactly what you're talking about and what you're doing with with Sinead. What you guys are doing together, I have literally just confirmed, and it happens so often when I do public talks, and if I single somebody out because I'm drawn to them, there is something that I'm speaking about in the moment that is literally evidence or confirmation. That's exactly what you need to be working on, or whatever path you're on. You're getting your confirmation there. So, yeah.
And I appreciate you helping me with the DNA thing, because that I look at the same thing. Like when it was